Welcome to Therapeutic Intentions Podcast. My name is Stephanie Dingbaum. I am a mental health therapist, and I am so passionate about all things health and wellness, personal development, and empowering others to be their most authentic and best versions of themselves. Here at Therapeutic Intentions, we are all about having intentional and authentic conversations on whole body health, healing practices, mindset, and ways to uplevel your life so you can truly be the best version of you. If you are a woman, a mom, hope to someday be a mom, a healer, or just in a place where you want to start prioritizing yourself and your health, then this podcast is for you. I am so glad you're here. If you're ready, let's get to it. Welcome back, beautiful people. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those of you who have been loyal listeners. It means a lot to me. You guys, I have been getting such amazing feedback and tips and advice from people. I cannot say thank you enough. Those of you that have been loyal have been letting me know that, and it means so much to me. I can't thank you all enough. The support, it just truly hits right in the feels, like right in the heart, you guys. It means the world to me because this is a goal that just feels so aligned with where I'm at right now professionally and where I'm going. And to hear that validation from others, it just means a lot. So thank you. I am going to be honest with you right now, as I'm recording this, there are thunderstorms outside. For those of you that don't know, I am located in eastern Iowa. I'm in the Midwest, and we have been getting like a string of thunderstorms this afternoon and into the evening. And it's evening right now while I'm recording this. All is good, just some normal spring thunderstorms. That's what we're experiencing today. And honestly, I've been wanting some. Fun fact about me, I love a good spring or summer thunderstorm. I don't know what it is. I think it's the water because I have such a spiritual connection with water. I just love a good spring thunderstorm. I like some lightning and thunder. I don't know what it is. It's just something that makes me happy. I get excited about them. What I don't get excited about, though, is when those thunderstorms become super severe and they're talking tornadoes and strong winds and things like that. Then I get a little anxious, and I typically hang out in the basement of our house when that happens. But I think we're good for tonight, so not too worried about that. But I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you hear thunder or a loud noise. That is what is going on. All right. What I am sharing with you guys today is the story of my fertility journey. The podcast in general happened in large part because of that fertility journey, which is so mind-blowing to me. 6 years ago, I definitely could not see how things would have panned out in that way. But to me, that's pretty amazing. And since the podcast is all about health and wellness, I just felt it made the most sense to share this journey with you guys because health and wellness has become such a big part of who I am professionally and personally, like I said, because of that fertility journey. So I kind of want you to know the catalyst for all of this. It's a lengthy story, I will say. And because of that, I'm splitting it into 2 episodes. There will be a part 1 and a part 2. More than likely, I'll air both of them within the same week because though I do like a good cliffhanger, I don't want you to have to wait a full week to get the full story. So this week there will be 2, which is kind of fun. I like mixing it up like that from time to time. I also like to keep my episodes within a certain length of time for my ideal listeners. And so I don't want to have to go over an hour if I can help it. So I'm just going to dive right in. Like I said, this is a pretty lengthy story, but I feel it's worth sharing in detail because when I get to part 2, when I'm sharing all the lessons I gained from it, you won't understand all of those if you don't know the details of the story. So if you're ready, I'm just going to dive right in. I have been on the fertility journey for 6 years now. There are some upcoming collabs and episodes that I'm going to be doing that really piggyback on this journey. So I want to be just completely transparent about what I've gone through so you know the foundation of my journey and my story with my health and wellness. I do want to start out, though, by sharing a trigger warning with everybody. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing my personal fertility journey, and that means I may be including some sensitive topics on that matter. So if discussions about infertility and related challenges may be distressing for you, please do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And if that means you have to skip this episode or these episodes, that's okay. You do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Truly, that's what this podcast is all about. And then along with the trigger warning, I also want to say, through this journey, my eyes have really been opened to, we'll say, some unhealthy and maybe toxic practices that I feel occur within the arena of like Western medicine. This doesn't mean that I am anti-Western medicine by any means. I truly do believe it serves a purpose in our lives. I also feel integrative and holistic health serve a big purpose in our lives as well. I'm sharing all of this because I just want all of you listeners to know I'm not holding back in sharing this story today. I mean, okay, that's why I started the podcast to begin with. I want to be able to be completely transparent, authentic, and honest with you guys. That's why I'm here. So I'm not going to hold back. Like I said in that first episode, I got a voice, you're going to hear it. But just know that might mean you might not like some of what's being shared. And you might not even agree with it. And that's okay. You guys, it's okay. We don't all have to see eye to eye. The great thing about this world is that we can all live amongst each other and not all agree on everything. And it's okay. We can still like each other and support each other, even if we have differing views, or I hope so. And if you truly feel you can't do that, you may need to do some internal work there. But I just want to be completely honest that I'm not going to hold back in some of the things that I've gained from this journey, because I truly feel you listeners can learn a lot from this story, especially those listeners who are also going through their own fertility journey. And so if I were to hold back, you wouldn't get the full benefit from this story that I want you to receive. So again, I just feel you guys need to know those things before I dive in. So like I said, been on this journey for 6 years. I'm going to kind of go through the timeline of it all from start to where I'm at now, because things have really built on each other in this journey. So starting all the way back in year 1, due to being one of the last friends in like our friend group to start trying, my husband and I knew that there was this rule in Western medicine world that you have to wait 1 year of trying before you can go to an OB or your primary care provider to get support for fertility. And that just never really sat right with me. I mean, I think it's ridiculous and I don't understand the reasoning behind it. And let's be honest, it probably goes back to insurance ruling our lives, but I just didn't like that. And my husband did not agree with that either. And so, you guys, we lied to our providers and we told them that we had been trying to get pregnant for a year, which, okay, it's not a complete lie. We started the journey in 2019. And at that point, we were married for a year. So logically, it made sense. But I was on birth control for our first year of pregnancy. And don't get me started on that topic. There will be a whole other podcast episode on that at some point in time. I feel there needs to be. So anyways, we weren't actively trying that first year of our marriage, but we told our providers we were, because we both agreed, no, we're not waiting a year. That's ridiculous. So we started working with an OB at our local hospital shortly after the start of 2019. And at that point, they do all those like typical things that you do within the first, or for most people, the second year of trying. So we had blood work done, both myself and my husband did. I went through what is called an HSG procedure, where they put like a blue dye into your fallopian tubes to make sure everything looks good down there. I also was put on letrozole, which is a similar med to what a lot of people hear is Clomid, but they're very similar. So my OB put me on letrozole to help kickstart the ovulation each cycle. I think I was only on that for either 4 or 6 months. I can't remember, but no luck with that. So tried all these things, did all the tests, all the things they have you do within the first year or second year, and didn't have luck with any of them. I didn't have any major bad reactions to anything, just didn't have luck with any of them. So within that first year, some of the lab work that they have you do is they have you do blood work on your thyroid. That was one of the first barriers that came up in my journey. The thyroid lab work came back and it was pretty concerning to the OB. So at that point, I was referred on to a local thyroid doctor to get support in that area. I didn't know exactly what this meant at that point in the journey, just that my thyroid levels were not where they would expect them to be for somebody who's trying to get pregnant. So after my first appointment with my now endocrinologist in Dubuque, Iowa, which is where I was going for that, I was immediately diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, and specifically it was called Graves' disease. It's a common autoimmune condition. I'm sure you've heard of it. If not, highly recommend doing some research on it. So the weird part about getting that diagnosis, though, is that initially my endocrinologist had told me that for your levels being so extreme and so off the charts, it's weird that your bodily symptoms do not show it. There's certain things that they look at in those appointments, and she's like, for your levels being so extreme, it's weird that you're not showing these things, these symptoms that I would expect you to be showing. And I never really knew what to say to that. Now looking back, it's like, yeah, I'm not surprised. Of course my body would appear different from somebody else's in that way. Then we went into, so years 2 and 3 kind of molded together for me because a lot of things happened and I don't know exactly what came when, whether it was in year 2 or year 3. So the next part of the journey going into year 2 and then year 3. So at the start of year 2, I was referred to the University of Iowa Fertility and Reproductive Endocrinology Clinic. And that was mainly the next step when our local hospital kind of exhausted all of their resources. Typical next step is they refer you on to Iowa City. And once we were down there, we worked with an OB, did additional blood work, multiple ultrasounds, and then all of this eventually led to a discussion on being referred for either IUI or IVF. So immediately the OB ruled out IUI. She was like, due to your lab work and everything, you're just not a good candidate for IUI. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's not waste time or money then. I was okay with that. Then the conversation turned to, so IVF is the journey that we were going to be going on. That was the kind of last resort, I guess you could say. And I was completely open to it at that point in time. I had friends that had gone through the IVF journey successfully. So I thought that was the next best thing. I really did. In years 2 and 3, we started the IVF journey. There are so many hoops that you have to jump through when it comes to IVF. Like your labs have to be within a certain range. You need to have a high egg count, or a high egg count is preferred, I should say, which I did not have at that point in time. They also like a high follicle count, and mine was, I would say so, not great, but not the worst either. After the initial round of checkpoints, we were in the clear to start IVF. So this meant we had to order all the meds that were needed for it. We had to meet with a nurse and doctor and go over the financial package of everything involved with IVF. Had to go over the calendar of when we would have to do what within my cycle. It's pretty extensive, very eye-opening, I will say that, but very extensive and a little intimidating too. I really applaud women that have gone through it successfully. Even those who have gone through it unsuccessfully, I applaud you all, because gosh, that is not an easy journey. Just wow. So after that initial round of checkpoints, we were cleared to move forward. So early on in 2021, we were given the green light to order the medication. You had to do that through a specialized pharmacy. And I think it was out of like Chicago or something like that. So within a week of then being given the green light, I actually got a call from my thyroid doctor, and she was telling me that my lab work came back and it was concerning her. And as a result of that, IVF had to be halted until we could get those levels regulated back where they needed to be. So talk about disappointing. Literally, just when we felt we were moving forward, everything got halted. And nobody talks about how much of a roller coaster this journey can be. And I was determined to change that. I was an open book from the start of this journey. And as we've gone on, I've just continued to be an open book. I truly feel like women need to talk about the fertility journey more because it is a problem. I truly feel it's a pandemic in our world. But nobody tells you just how much of an emotional roller coaster it can be. So everything got halted. Total disappointment. Luckily, still do have, an amazing support system at that time. And my husband, Mitch, and I, we also have such a strong marriage. So all of that really helped. But still, the highs and lows can just be so freaking exhausting through this journey. And that was just the start, you guys. Like, you'll hear there's so many more. But that was the first time that I was like, are you freaking kidding me? How can this be happening? So going through the thyroid issues, my thyroid doctor felt that if we couldn't get my thyroid levels regulated to where they needed to be, that what needed to happen was I was either going to need to have my thyroid removed completely, or the other option was radioiodine therapy, which I'll be completely honest, I did not like the idea of radioiodine. I truly felt that I and my body are too young to be going through that and putting our body through that. I also, at that point, like, just had some concerns about potential long-term effects from that treatment. So in my mind, I was already telling myself, like, that's not an option. I am not going through with radioiodine therapy. So I knew at some point thyroid removal may have to be talked about. But I'm not going to lie, at that point in my journey, I was so confident that I would get my levels where they needed to be. I wasn't even concerned that thyroid surgery was ever going to have to happen. I just wasn't letting myself think that it was going to need to be an issue. So, like I said, very confident that I was going to get those levels back up. My thyroid meds were just constantly adjusted through this entire journey. So my thyroid doctor would have me redo blood work about every 6 to 8 weeks so she could keep an eye on my levels. And if they weren't where they needed to be, the meds would just get readjusted or increased or decreased or whatever needed to happen. So again, once I got the green light to start up IVF from my endocrinologist, we then proceeded yet again. And since we had already passed some of those initial checkpoints the first time we were going through it, we actually got to skip those and literally just got to pick up where we left off last time, which was such a great thing at that point for me. Just any point in the journey when I could save time, I was all for it. So this meant going back to Iowa City for, another round of ultrasounds, more lab work, things like that, just wanting to make sure that your levels are where they need to be so that we can truly proceed with IVF again. So I was waiting for my next cycle to start to know like when we could actually start the initial round of meds. This meant I had to call that pharmacy, order the meds. Meds were actually delivered within a week's time, which is just amazing. I feel like for meds, that's quite a big deal, especially for the amount of meds we were ordering for IVF. And then at that point, we literally just had to wait for that specific time in my cycle to get the ball rolling. So at this point, I was pumped. I literally was like, all right, we're getting closer to having a baby. This is going to be great. And then another halt. And you guys, I remember this day so vividly in my mind. And it's ironic, the weather that day was very similar to how it is today. Severe thunderstorms that day. But again, I remember it so vividly. At that time in my journey, I was working as a school social worker at one of our local school districts here in our county. This time, instead of my endocrinologist calling me, one of the Iowa City doctors or nurses called me. I was at school at work at the time, and they called me. And she was telling me that my blood work was very concerning again. And also, this time my white blood cell count had dropped significantly. So they explained it to me that sometimes this can happen, though it's pretty rare. Sometimes people who take this specific thyroid medication can have an effect on their white blood cell count. And truth be told, my reaction initially was like, oh, go figure, that something rare that rarely happens to women is happening to me. Wasn't even surprised at that point, you guys. And I'm going to be honest, through this whole journey, I was not like, woe is me all that often. But there are definitely times where I was. And I think that's normal and it's okay. I just didn't let myself stay in that headspace for too long. So the nurse told me that she hated to be the bearer of bad news, but I was going to have to halt the IVF process yet again. I got off the phone with her and I'm at work, like I mentioned. I went and shut my office door and I literally just bawled my eyes out. And I just let myself cry. And shortly after that, one of the teachers that I work with, who had become a really good friend of mine, and I've been very honest with her about the fertility journey for us, texted her, asked her to come in if she could. She came in. Thank God for that support, you guys. Seriously, just not even just her, but all the friends and confidants I had through this whole journey have just been so amazing. So in that moment, having her there was just so helpful. I just kind of let myself let it out. I needed to. This was second time, again, going through this within a year. It was just such a letdown. Truly felt like the wind was taken out of my sails. So later that same day, like I said, we were experiencing some severe thunderstorms. And of course, perfect timing, Mitch happened to be out of town for work that week. Just horrible timing, especially for getting that news. I really needed him there, but this is just sometimes how things go. As I tend to do when I know that severe weather is coming, I was preparing our like shelter part of our basement that we go to when they're talking about a chance of tornadoes. So I was getting candles and flashlights in our basement where they needed to be, and just making sure we had a leash down there for the dog, and blankets and pillows, things like that. So I'm getting all these things put in the basement. And as I'm in the basement getting that like shelter area all situated, I got another call from Iowa City, pretty much reiterating all of the same things and telling me that they had talked with my endocrinologist and that they were both on the same page that things had to be halted. And even though I already had heard the news, I don't know if it was because of the weather or what, but hearing it all again, as soon as I got off the phone, I just let it all out again. I just had a complete meltdown. Luckily, I was by myself, so I felt I could actually do this. And then after crying for a while, I decided I needed to release all of these emotions that I was experiencing. So I literally grabbed one of my journals that I had and I just started writing. I wrote down the experience of the phone calls. I wrote down like what I was doing, where I was at, my reaction to them, and it was so therapeutic. What was actually most devastating of all of this was that the meds for starting IVF were at our house already. Literally, we had them laid out across our kitchen table in the order that I was going to need to take them, because we were expecting to start them literally that following week. So again, just such a freaking letdown. So all the emotions that I was going through, completely valid. And I knew that. But even when you know how normal emotions are, it still freaking sucks. Like it does. And so after the storm had passed, and actually that night the tornado sirens did go off. Yeah, I'm glad I had everything down there and everything for the storm. But then after the storms had passed, I went back upstairs, and just seeing all the meds there, I was just like, what a waste. Who even knows if we're going to need these? Who even knows if we're ever going to use these? It was just such a disappointing time that day. And that point in my journey, I was truly struggling. That all just really did hit me pretty hard. And I'll say, mentally and physically, I felt so ready to move forward with IVF. Everything seemed to be aligning. It just felt so right for us. Anyways, moving on. The weekend after receiving that news, Mitch also was going to be out of town, ironically, for a bachelor party for one of his best friends, and they were going to be down in Nashville, Tennessee that weekend. Because of all the devastating news that week, I pretty much had just decided I was going to spend the entire weekend just staying away from people. I kind of just wanted to be a hermit for the weekend. But then I also took it upon myself and I bought a bunch of paint from our local Ace Hardware and decided we had this spare room that, for the previous few years, I decided was going to be our nursery when we did get pregnant. Well, for almost, I think, like 6 months, this room was just sitting empty. And I had listened to a podcast at one point in time about preparing the room. I got really big into like manifestation, and I decided, okay, I'm going to prepare this room for a nursery. Well, after getting that devastating news, I decided I'm going to move forward. I'm going to do a step beyond it just being empty. I'm going to paint the walls and get the walls ready for what I want the nursery to look like. So I went to the local hardware store, got paint, got all the tools that I needed. Mitch was going to be out of town. So in my mind, I'm like, what better time? I can totally tackle this room by myself. I don't need a man to be here. And so I did. I literally tackled painting the entire room, trim and everything by myself. And that was so empowering. Definitely what I needed that weekend. It felt so good completing that room. Initially, like I said, that room was set to be a nursery. I mentioned this already, but I got really big into manifestation. And so I was willing to try anything, whatever it takes to make this happen, right? Whether it be woo-woo or spiritual or whatever you want to call it, I got huge into those like specific manifestation practices. And in my mind, having this room all painted and even more ready for a baby, I was like, that's going to help. This is great. So fast forward from that, going into year 4 and 5 of the journey, this second halt, like I said before, it hit me like a ton of bricks. But looking back, it was a major blessing in disguise, you guys. It literally sent me into the world of integrative health and holistic health, which has been a game changer for me. I cannot emphasize this enough. So around year 4 of trying, I was then introduced to an integrative practitioner out of Galena, Illinois. Her name was Andrea. Her whole selling point was that she could help women regulate their hormones naturally, and then she can also help them prepare their bodies for a fertility journey naturally as well. At that point in my journey, I was like, perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So I called her up, set up an intake. You guys, Andrea was such a big blessing in my life at this point in time. While working with Andrea, my endocrinologist had told me that I needed to be scheduled for surgery to get my thyroid removed if I wasn't going to be going through with the radioiodine treatment. And while I understood that surgery was necessary, I wanted to give myself time to work with Andrea to see what she could do for my body and my hormone levels. So I explained this to my endocrinologist. I literally just told her, can you just give me 6 months to work with this integrative practitioner to see what she can do for me? And then I said, if the levels don't improve at that point, and if I have to move forward with surgery at that point, then I will be more open to it. But at that point, I just truly felt, no, listen, there are more things I can do than surgery. Let me try some other things. That also is a frustrating thing, is I feel like, oh, meds don't work, so surgery has to be the only other option. That is not always true. There are things you can try, even though it may be outside of that doctor's realm of understanding. There are always other things that you can try. So she agreed. She said, I'll give you 6 months, but she was very firm. If nothing changes at the end of the 6 months, you do have to have this surgery, which you can't see me, but I'm like rolling my eyes at that. Anyways, with that being said, I truly went full force into working with Andrea. I literally took her professional advice to heart and did everything to a T, by the book, literally. For those of you that don't know me well, I am a recovering perfectionist. So you give me orders, I'm going to follow them to a T. That's just how I am. I have to follow the rules. I'm a rule follower. They had me do more extensive lab work than any other doctor had me do at that point in time, which, knowing what I know now, I'm not surprised by that. She had me do a hair tissue mineral analysis, She was constantly checking my iodine levels. I did an organic acids test, and then also just more extensive blood work as well. And when I say more extensive, I mean more than what a typical Western medicine OB will have you do, which is what makes integrative health so amazing. Because they'll do things that your typical primary care provider can't do. Because I'm not paying insurance, I'm not billing it to insurance. I'm paying all of this out of pocket. So I get to have more control than picking it out of insurance's control, which is such a great feeling, let me tell you. So Andrea and I would meet, we would go over my results from all the labs and everything that she had me run. And then based on what she was seeing from all of my lab work, she would then make suggestions for me to like help regulate my levels, which ultimately was the hormones and regulating those. So through working with Andrea, there was so many aha moments that came through. And I'm just going to share most of what I can remember from working with her. One being that I found out that my adrenal glands were depleted. I'm not going to get into the science of that, but I am going to have a future collab episode with Andrea where she can explain some of this. But you guys, it's fascinating. My eyes were open so much from all of the results that came through from working with her. Another big aha moment was we focused a lot on my gut health, which for those of you that don't understand, so my autoimmune condition was Graves' disease. Well, typically autoimmune conditions are tied to gut health because we hold our immune system in our gut. And so like I said, we focused a lot on my gut health. With that being said, she highly recommended that I slowly wean off of dairy and gluten. So like I said, I followed everything by the book. So I literally became dairy and gluten free. And when I made that switch in my diet, it was such a game changer, you guys. And then besides that, I did some liver detoxes as well. And I would just say the mixture of the liver detoxes with being dairy and gluten free changed my life. Seriously, making these changes changed me energetically and physically. I didn't bloat after meals anymore. I was having less stomach issues, less stomach cramps after meals. Like I said, I had more energy. I was also sleeping better. And then the big one for me, my anxiety had significantly dropped after doing this work with Andrea. Like, I always diagnosed myself as somebody with anxiety, but after making these changes in my diet and lifestyle, the anxiety was practically at a zero. It was so crazy, such a game changer in my life. So truly, I was feeling the best that I had in a really long time after working with Andrea. So grateful for that time with her. I cannot wait for you guys to hear. We'll be doing a collab soon, so I can't wait for you to hear about that information that she has to share in that collab. So my time with Andrea was 6 months, and then I got my lab work redone for my thyroid, went in for my appointment with my endocrinologist, and I literally manifested this the whole way there. I'm visualizing in my head my lab work being perfect within optimal range. I was doing, besides the visualization, I was doing affirmations and gratitude around this. I literally manifested this. Went in for that appointment, and my endocrinologist, she could not believe what she was seeing, you guys. She literally told me, she's like, I don't know how, but your levels are completely within normal range. She's like, I have no concerns. It was mind-blowing to me. I literally manifested that. So she was like, what are you doing in your life? Like, how are you making this happen? So I told her everything. I told her about working with Andrea, all the things Andrea was having me do, all the lab work she had ran. I told her about all the changes I had made. And a lot of that, to be fair, is outside of the thyroid doctor's wheelhouse. But she was like, okay, well, whatever you're doing, keep it up because it's working. Everything's where it needs to be. So keep doing what you're doing. I left that appointment feeling literally over the moon. I called Andrea when we got out of there and literally just thanked her over and over and over again because I was so grateful for everything that she had helped me with in that time. So then fast forward 3 months later, my endocrinologist called me one day to tell me that my recent lab check that I had done showed that my thyroid levels yet again had dropped, this time significantly. Again, we're talking about the emotional roller coaster of the fertility world. It was such a huge letdown for me. I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to, thought I was doing everything right, thought everything I was doing was helping, literally thought I was out of the woods for needing surgery. And then my thyroid doctor was like, nope, we need to get surgery scheduled ASAP. We can't wait. Your levels have been having problems for too long now. So she sent me to a surgeon in Iowa City. So they scheduled the consultation with the surgeon in March of 2023. And you guys, even meeting with the surgeon was an emotional roller coaster, which I did not expect this. I thought everything I've been doing, my body's in great health. Even if I have to have surgery, at least my body is in great health for this. I had never had surgery before in my life, so I did not know what to expect. Going into that consultation though with him, thank God Mitch was with me because it was such an emotional roller coaster. I felt like he had literally never worked with a patient who has been doing things in the integrative health world. And you guys, he wasn't like a young surgeon either. Like in his 20 plus years of working, I just had a really hard time believing that he's never had a patient who has been doing work in the integrative health world for themselves. So I say all of that because he had concerns because I had disclosed that I had been taking iodine drops to help with my thyroid levels. That was per Andrea's recommendations. Well, apparently iodine is something that surgeons use when the thyroid has to get removed. So they'll have you take iodine for a few weeks leading up to surgery because it helps reduce the thyroid hormone synthesis and release. And it also helps with other like thyroid cellularity and vascularity and things like that. So in other words, the surgeon doesn't want the iodine to doesn't want the thyroid, to overreact during surgery and then start pushing out a ton of hormone. Because if that happens, he explained to me that can actually cause death during surgery. So that's why they give iodine, because it helps to prevent the thyroid from overreacting during surgery. But since I had been taking iodine, my body was already used to it, so he couldn't give it to me because my body's already been used to having it. So it wouldn't have the same effect on my body as it would for somebody who's never taken it. So that actually was a new situation for him that he'd never dealt with. Again, another barrier. Go figure. How in his, I swear he's probably been a surgeon for 30 years. I had a hard time believing he's never dealt with this. So he had to go consult with another surgeon or another physician of some kind. So he was out of the room for a while. And then when he came back in, I was just in tears because I was like, what are we going to do? There's no other option. Crap, He came back in, calmed me down, and told me that there was another medication that they could give me that would have the same effect on my thyroid as the iodine. So I was in the clear. Everything was good. But again, talk about an emotional roller coaster. Oh my word. Just one thing after another, it seemed like. So surgery ended up being scheduled for May 4th of 2023. This was my first ever surgery, like I said. So emotions were a little heightened because of that. Luckily, my husband and my mom were amazing throughout all of this. They actually went down with me for the night before surgery because we had to get a hotel room because surgery was supposed to start at 6 a.m. the next morning. And then post-surgery, I was off work for 3 weeks just to let myself recover. That was actually the surgeon's orders, not my own decision. But I'm glad I took his orders because that ended up being a huge blessing in disguise as well. So 8 weeks post-surgery, I was again okay to start up IVF. But I'm going to be completely honest, you guys. I actually, and you might find this to be a little bit of a surprise, but I actually put my foot down this time and I said, no, we're not, IVF is no longer an option for us. No, it had been halted twice before. That both times was so devastating for me emotionally. I didn't want to risk going through that again. And also through my time in my fertility journey at that point in time, I had seen a close friend of mine go through it and not have a great experience. And it kind of freaked me out a little bit. And it kind of made me feel like, this is very unnatural. The stress of the IVF journey just did not sit well with me. Again, that's my journey. I know that's not how it is for everybody, but seeing a friend go through it and how stressful it was on her, I didn't want to risk having that be our experience. I didn't want to bring a baby into this world with the stress of the schedule of it all. It just seemed so unnatural to me. So I put my foot down and said, no, that's not in the cards for us. We're not going through with IVF. I also feel I have a very strong, I know I have a very strong intuition. I think I've shared this before on here. So I truly just was trusting my gut on this decision. And that really just felt right to me. So I then switched at that point in time. Once we were cleared for IVF, I then switched to working with a different practitioner. I was no longer working with Andrea. I had found this nurse midwife out of Dubuque. Her name's Megan. And she actually specializes in hormone health and fertility care as well. So I started working with her, I believe, in September of 2020. So at that time, before I even started working with her, online, she was claiming a 100% success rate. So literally and figuratively, I was putting my air quote eggs in her basket. It just seemed right. Again, I was trusting my gut. Working with Megan was awesome. I loved her. She was a great fit for me. Definitely had that holistic approach, which was what I was looking for at that point in time. So great decision on my part. I will say that. Megan, similar to Andrea, did more extensive lab work. She also looked at my progesterone levels and estrogen levels, which, side note, I cannot believe that Western medicine doesn't look at that. And if they do, I was not aware of it. That was never shared with me. So she looked at my progesterone levels, my estrogen levels, looked at my egg count, and thank God she did, because that was how I realized that I have a decreased ovarian reserve, aka low egg count for somebody my age. So Megan actually put me on a mixture of some supplements and then also a tincture. If you don't know what tinctures are, highly recommend looking into them. They're so good for our body, things like truly from this earth. She had me taking this concoction of supplements and then a tincture. And after rechecking my labs 3 months later, it showed that my egg count was increasing. So that was great news. I truly needed that news after the journey I had been on the 2, 3, 4 previous years. That was like music to my ears at that point in time. It also validated that I made the right choice working with her. And honestly, I'm going to say also, thank goodness I worked with Andrea prior to working with Megan, because I truly feel like Andrea helped me lay the groundwork in my journey. And then with everything that Megan had me do, it was like, had I not done the things I had done with Andrea, my body and hormone levels would not have been at the same place. So thank God for both of those women. They are godsends, in my opinion. And then at the end of my 6 months working with Megan, she had shared that unfortunately she was taking a sabbatical for the time being. So even though I loved working with her and I was devastated to hear that, this meant I had to find a new fertility specialist to work with. And it also meant starting all over, which initially I was bummed about that. But after some time, felt like, no, actually, this is a good thing. This is, again, something I have some control over in this journey. Her taking a sabbatical is something I don't have control over. Me getting to choose who I'm going to work with, who's going to help me hopefully get pregnant, I have control over that. That's a beautiful thing, right? So I did a ton of research, looked at some integrative and holistic practitioners in some surrounding cities from where I live, and I will share where I'm at currently with the journey in part 2 of my podcast. So I hate to leave you on a cliffhanger, but this seems like a good natural place to stop with this story. If you've been listening the whole time, thank you guys. Thank you for your compassion and understanding as you've been listening to this. It's not always easy for people to talk about this. And even though I do find it easy to talk about, it helps knowing you have supportive listeners. It really does. Thank you for being here. I hope you found a small tidbit of information from this episode that was helpful for you. If you did, please rate and review the podcast. I would really appreciate it. The reviews, the ratings really help to get my podcast out there to more listeners. And let's be honest, that's the whole goal here. So if you find any of these episodes that you've listened to so far helpful, please review or rate the podcast on whatever app you listen to it on. I really appreciate it. Until next time. Thank you so much for listening to us. It means so much to me. If there were any aha moments or anything that really resonated with you on today's episode, then please take a minute and share it on your social media and tag me so I can personally thank you. Also, if you could, please rate and review the podcast as it is new, and that really helps to get the word out there more and reach even more listeners. I'll catch you on the next episode.